At 07:55, on the morning of December the 7th, 1941, Second Lieutenant George Welch stood in his tuxedo pants from the night before and watched smoke rising over Pearl Harbor. He and Second Lieutenant Kenneth Taylor had been awake for 24 hours straight, all-night poker game at the Wheeler Field Officers Club. They were talking about going for a swim when the first bombs fell. The explosions were close enough to rattle the windows, close enough to feel in the chest. Welch ran outside and saw them immediately. Japanese aircraft, Nakajima B-5N Kate bombers and Mitsubishi A-6M0 fighters. Dozens of them. They were tearing Wheeler Field apart. The flight line was already burning. Rows of Curtiss P-40 Tomahawk fighters sat wingtip to wingtip on the tarmac, arranged that way to prevent sabotage. Perfect targets. The Japanese pilots knew it. They came in low, strafing runs that chewed through aluminum and fuel tanks. Aircraft exploded. Men ran. The sound was deafening. Taylor appeared beside Welch. Both men wore tuxedo pants and dress shirts from the night before. Neither had slept. Both understood immediately what was happening. This was not an exercise. This was war. And every American fighter at Wheeler was being destroyed on the ground. Taylor had one thought. Halewa, the auxiliary airstrip 11 miles north, where the 47th Pursuit Squadron kept 18 P-40Bs for gunnery practice. Taylor grabbed Welch. They ran for Taylor's new Buick. Taylor drove. Welch rode shotgun. They tore out of Wheeler Field at speeds reaching 100 miles per hour. The roads were empty. Most of Oahu was still asleep. But the Japanese pilots saw them. 2 Zeros peeled off from the formation, attacking Wheeler, and dove toward the Buick. Taylor saw them coming in the rearview mirror. He accelerated. The Buick hit 110 miles per hour on the straightaway. The Zeros opened fire. 20mm cannon rounds and 7.7mm machine gun fire raked the road behind them. Bullets kicked up asphalt. Taylor swerved. The Zeros made another pass. More cannon fire. The rounds impacted to the left of the car, tearing chunks out of the roadway. Then the fighters pulled up and returned to Wheeler. There were more lucrative targets there. Taylor kept driving. They covered 11 miles in less than 10 minutes when they reached Halewa Auxiliary Airstrip. The field was untouched. The Japanese had ignored it. Too small, too insignificant. The ground crews were already working. Taylor had called ahead from Wheeler before they left. He had not asked for permission. He had not waited for orders. He had told the ground crews directly, get 2 P-40B Tomahawks fueled and armed for combat, now. The mechanics had 2 fighters ready, not fully armed. There had not been time. The 50 caliber machine guns in the wings were loaded. The 30 caliber guns in the nose were loaded. But the ammunition boxes were not full. Maybe 60 rounds per gun, maybe less. It did not matter. Welch and Taylor climbed into their cockpits. Taylor still wore his tuxedo pants. Welch wore his dress shirt. Neither wore proper flight gear. No time. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The P-40B Tomahawk was not the best fighter in the world. Everyone knew that. It could not match the Zero's climb rate. It could not match the Zero's turn radius. The Zero could outmaneuver it in a dogfight every single time. But the P-40 had advantages. It was faster in a dive. It was heavily armored. It could absorb punishment. And it had 6 machine guns, 2 50 caliber Browning M2 heavy machine guns in the nose, 4 30 caliber Browning machine guns in the wings. When all 6 guns fired together, the combined firepower was devastating. Welch fired up his engine first. The Allison 51710 inline 12-cylinder liquid-cooled engine roared to life. 1,150 horsepower. The propeller spun. Taylor started his engine seconds later. Both men ran through abbreviated pre-flight checks, fuel, pressures, temperatures, controls. Everything looked good enough. They did not have time for a full check. Welch released the brakes and taxied onto the grass strip. Taylor followed. Halewa was a training field. No paved runway, just packed earth and grass. The P-40Bs accelerated. Tail up. Airspeed climbing. 60 knots, 80 knots. 100 knots, wheels up. They were airborne at 0815 hours, 20 minutes after the first Japanese bombs hit Wheeler. They climbed south toward the smoke, rising from Pearl Harbor and Wheeler Field. The sky ahead was full of aircraft. Japanese aircraft. Welch counted them as they climbed. Dozens, maybe more than 100. 2 P-40Bs against 100 Japanese attackers. The odds were not good. But Welch and Taylor were not thinking about odds. They were thinking about the men dying at Wheeler. They were thinking about the ships burning at Pearl Harbor. They were thinking about revenge. At 9,000 feet, they spotted them. A formation of Nakajima B-5 N-Kate bombers circling over Iwo Mooring Mast Field, a Marine Corps air station southwest of Pearl Harbor. The Kates were dive bombers, slower than fighters, less maneuverable. They were finishing their attack runs on Iwo. The Marine aircraft on the ground were already destroyed. Welch saw an opportunity. He called to Taylor over the radio. "Hey, Grits, I see Jap bombers down there just like sitting ducks." Taylor saw them too. Both pilots pushed their control sticks forward. The P-40Bs dove. Airspeed climbed rapidly, 150 knots, 200 knots, 250 knots. The P-40 was faster in a dive than almost any fighter in the world. The Kates did not see them coming. The Japanese bombers were in a loose wagon wheel formation, circling, vulnerable. Welch came in from above and behind. He picked a target, lined up the gun sight, closed to 300 yards, 200 yards, 100 yards. He pressed the trigger. Only 3 of his 4 wing guns fired. 1 gun was jammed, but 3 50 caliber machine guns and 2 30 caliber guns poured fire into the Kate. Tracers walked up the fuselage. The bomber caught fire immediately. Black smoke poured from the engine. The Kate rolled over and dove into the ground. Welch later described the moment in a debrief. Their rear gunner was apparently shooting at the ground because they didn't see us coming. I got him in a 5-second burst. He burned up right away. Taylor was right behind him. He picked a different Kate, closed the range, fired. His rounds tore into the bomber's engine and fuel tanks. The Kate exploded. Burning debris tumbled through the sky. The pilot, Iwao Oka, died instantly. But Taylor took hits. The Kate's rear gunner had seen him coming at the last second. 7.7mm rounds from the rear gun raked Taylor's P-40. 1 round came through the canopy within an inch of Taylor's head. It exploded in the cockpit. Shrapnel tore through Taylor's left arm. More fragments embedded in his leg. Blood poured down his arm. Taylor looked at the wound. Not arterial, he could still fly. He ignored the pain and looked for another target. The remaining Kates scattered. Their formation broke apart. They dove for the deck, trying to escape. Welch and Taylor pursued. They shot down 1 more Kate each before their ammunition ran low. 4 bombers destroyed in less than 3 minutes, but they were not done. Welch checked his ammunition counters, nearly empty, maybe 10 rounds per gun. Taylor's ammunition was equally low. They needed to rearm. Wheeler Field was closest. Both pilots turned north and headed for their home base. The smoke from the burning hangars and aircraft was visible from miles away. They descended through the smoke and chaos. Japanese Zeros were still overhead. The second wave of the attack had begun. Welch called the tower. The response was immediate. "Do not land. The field is under attack." Welch ignored the order. He brought his P-40 down through the Skagen Japanese fighters. His wheels touched down on Wheeler's main runway at 0840. Taylor landed 30 seconds behind him. As soon as they taxied off the runway, ground crews swarmed the aircraft. Fuel trucks pulled up. Ammunition carts appeared. Armorers began reloading the machine guns. Senior officers ran toward the 2 pilots. Lieutenant Colonel William Flood, the base commander, was furious. "You are ordered to leave those airplanes. Disperse them immediately. This field is under attack. You are not authorized to take off." Taylor and Welch ignored him. They stayed in their cockpits. Welch yelled at the armorers, "Hurry up, load the 50s. Forget the 30s, just get the 50 caliber." Guns loaded. The armorers worked frantically. They pulled ammunition belts from the storage boxes and fed them into the wing guns. 50 caliber rounds, armor-piercing, incendiary, tracer, mixed belts for maximum effectiveness against aircraft. Taylor's arm was still bleeding. A medic ran up with bandages. Taylor waved him off. "No time, just load the guns." Then the sound changed. Everyone on the flight line heard it. A different engine note, higher pitched, the distinctive sound of Nakajima Sakai radial engines. Zeros. The second wave of Japanese fighters swept over Wheeler from the east. Aichi D-3 Aval dive bombers escorted by Zeros. They came in low, strafing runs on the parked aircraft and buildings. Machine gun fire raked across the tarmac. Everyone scattered. Lieutenant Colonel Flood and the medics dove for cover. The armorers dropped their tools and ran for the nearest building. Welch and Taylor did not run. They sat in their cockpits while bullets snapped past their canopies. They watched the Zeros make their pass. Then Welch pushed his throttle forward. Taylor did the same. Both P-40Bs began rolling before the armorers had finished loading. The ammunition boxes in the wings were not closed. The mechanics had not secured the access panels. It did not matter. Welch and Taylor accelerated down the runway with ammunition boxes open and panels flapping. Taylor's P-40 hit some ammunition carts on the taxiway. The plane bounced. The landing gear absorbed the impact. He kept going. They took off directly into the Japanese formation. The Zeros and Vals were turning back for another strafing pass when two P-40Bs lifted off and climbed straight toward them. The Japanese pilots were surprised. They had just finished destroying the American fighters on the ground. Now, two P-40s were climbing to meet them. Welch's machine guns were still disconnected. The armorers had not finished the reload. Only his .30 caliber nose guns were working. He fired them anyway. The lighter rounds were less effective against aircraft, but they worked. Taylor's guns were fully loaded, all six. He picked a Val-dive bomber and opened fire. The .50 caliber rounds tore through the Val's engine cowling. The bomber caught fire and fell away. Welch spotted a Zero on Taylor's tail. The Japanese pilot had seen Taylor shoot down the Val and moved to attack. Welch turned hard. His P-40 groaned under the G-forces. He lined up the Zero in his sights, fired his .30 caliber guns. The rounds hit the Zero's fuselage and wing root. The fighter broke off the attack and dove away trailing smoke. Taylor found another target, a Val, attempting to escape to the south. He chased it down. The Val's rear gunner fired continuously. 7.7mm rounds hit Taylor's P-40. More holes in the wings, more holes in the fuselage. Taylor closed the range and fired. His .50 caliber guns shredded the Val's tail section. The dive bomber rolled over and crashed into a pineapple field north of Pearl Harbor. Welch engaged a Zero at close range. His P-40 was heavily damaged now. Cannon fire from a Japanese fighter had torn through his left wing. Hydraulic fluid streamed from the wing root. The aircraft was sluggish, but the gun still worked. Welch got behind the Zero and fired a long burst. The Japanese fighter exploded. Debris peppered Welch's windscreen. By 0930, the sky was clearing. The Japanese attack was ending. The raiders were forming up and heading back to their carriers. Welch and Taylor had been in continuous combat for over an hour. Both men were exhausted. Both aircraft were shot, full of holes. Taylor was still bleeding from his arm wound. Welch's hydraulic system was failing. They returned to Wheeler and landed for the second time that morning. The flight line was destruction. Smoke, fire, and shattered aircraft everywhere. Bodies lay where they had fallen. Medics moved among the wounded, but two P-40Bs taxied back to the parking area. The ground crews cheered. Welch and Taylor had shot down 4 Japanese aircraft each in the first sorties. They had shot down 2 more each in the second sortie. 6 confirmed kills between them. Some reports suggested more. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor killed 2,403 Americans. It wounded 1,104 more. It destroyed or damaged 18 capital ships. It destroyed 188 American aircraft. It crippled the Pacific Fleet. But 14 American pilots got into the air that morning. They flew obsolete fighters against overwhelming odds. They shot down 10 Japanese aircraft. George Welch and Kenneth Taylor accounted for 6 of those kills. Both men received the Distinguished Service Cross. Welch was nominated for the Medal of Honor, but was denied because he had taken off without authorization. That decision was controversial then and remains controversial now. The legend grew quickly. Stories spread through the Pacific Fleet. 2 pilots in tuxedo pants, taking off under fire, shooting down Japanese aircraft against impossible odds. The stories were embellished over time. Some accounts claimed they shot down more aircraft than officially credited. Some accounts claimed they flew from grounded aircraft. Some accounts claimed they destroyed entire formations. The truth was remarkable enough. But the legend points to something deeper, a question that haunted American forces throughout 1941 and 42. Could American pilots in American aircraft defeat Japanese fighters? The Zero was superior in almost every measurable way. It climbed faster, it turned tighter, It had longer range. Japanese pilots were veterans of combat in China. They were skilled. They were experienced. They were confident. American pilots were inexperienced. Most had never seen combat. Their aircraft were considered inferior. Wheeler Field and Pearl Harbor seemed to prove it. American aircraft destroyed on the ground. American ships sunk at their moorings, a catastrophic defeat. But Welch and Taylor had proven something else. They had proven that aggressive tactics could overcome technical disadvantages. They had proven that the P-40 could fight the Zero and win. Not in a turning dogfight. The P-40 would lose that fight every time. But in a diving attack. In a hit-and-run engagement, using speed and firepower instead of maneuverability. That lesson would echo through the Pacific War. Claire Chennault's Flying Tigers in China built their entire tactical doctrine around it. Never dogfight the Zero. Dive, attack, extend, use the P-40's advantages, avoid its weaknesses. The formula worked, but it started at Pearl Harbor, with two pilots who refused to let their aircraft be destroyed on the ground, who took off without orders, who flew into overwhelming enemy formations, who proved that American pilots could fight back and win. The myth of the grounded P-40 shooting down 7 Zeros persists because it captures something essential about December 7th, 1941. The desperate improvisation, the refusal to surrender, the willingness to fight back against impossible odds. The story is not literally true. No pilot shot down Japanese aircraft from a parked plane. But the spirit of the story is true. American pilots at Pearl Harbor fought back with whatever they had, even if it was a partially armed fighter, even if it meant taking off while under attack, even if it meant flying in tuxedo pants. The real story is more complex and more interesting than the legend. It involves specific decisions made under extreme pressure. It involves understanding how fighter combat actually worked in 1941. It involves recognizing both the advantages and limitations of the P-40 Warhawk. And it involves understanding the Japanese tactical doctrine that made Pearl Harbor possible in the first place. The Curtiss P-40 Warhawk was not designed to fight the Mitsubishi Zero. It was designed in 1937 to replace the P-36 Hawk as the United States Army Air Corps' frontline fighter. The design philosophy was straightforward. Heavy armor, heavy armament, adequate speed. The liquid-cooled Allison 5-1710 engine produced 1,150 horsepower. Top speed was 360 miles per hour at 15,000 feet. Service ceiling was 29,000 feet. Range was 750 miles. The armament was impressive for its time. Two 50-caliber Browning M2 machine guns mounted in the nose, 4 30-caliber machine guns in the wings. Later models replaced the 30-caliber wing guns with 4 additional 50-caliber guns. The combined firepower could shred enemy aircraft. The armor protection was equally impressive. Steel plate behind the pilot's seat, bullet-resistant windscreen, self-sealing fuel tanks in later models. The P-40 could absorb tremendous punishment and keep flying. But it had weaknesses. The single-stage supercharger meant the engine lost power at high altitude. Above 15,000 feet, performance degraded rapidly. The aircraft was heavy, over 8,000 pounds, fully loaded. That weight limited climb rate and maneuverability. In a turning dogfight, the P-40 could not match lighter, more agile fighters. The Mitsubishi A6M0 was a completely different design philosophy. Lightweight, maximum maneuverability, long range, no armor. The Nakajima Sakai radial engine produced only 940 horsepower, but the Zero weighed just 5,300 pounds, empty. The power-to-weight ratio was exceptional. Top speed was 331 miles per hour. Service ceiling was 33,000 feet. Combat radius was 1,160 miles with drop tanks. The Zero could outclimb almost any fighter in the world. It could outturn almost any fighter in the world. Its climb rate was 4,000 feet per minute. The P-40's climb rate was 2,050 feet per minute. In a turning fight at low altitude, the Zero could complete a full 360-degree turn in less time than it took the P-40 to turn 180 degrees. But the Zero had critical weaknesses. No armor protection for the pilot, no self-sealing fuel tanks. The aircraft was constructed with lightweight aluminum alloys that caught fire easily. A single .50 caliber round in the right place could ignite the fuel tanks and destroy the aircraft. Japanese tactical doctrine emphasized maneuverability over protection. The philosophy was offensive, attack aggressively, use superior maneuverability to gain position, destroy the enemy before they can shoot back. It worked brilliantly against Chinese aircraft. In 1937 through 1941, Chinese pilots flew obsolete Soviet and American fighters. They lacked training. They lacked experience. They lacked cohesive tactical doctrine. The Zero dominated them completely. But American pilots, like Welch and Taylor, discovered the weaknesses. The Zero was fragile. Heavy machine gun fire could destroy it. The Zero was slower in a dive. The P-40 could dive away, and the Zero could not follow. The Zero's engine cut out under negative G-forces. The float carburetor could not handle inverted flight or sustain negative G maneuvers. The P-40's fuel injection system had no such limitation. Claire Chennault understood this completely. He commanded the 1st American Volunteer Group in China, the Flying Tigers. His pilots flew P-40C and P-40E Warhawks against the Japanese Army Air Force and Japanese Navy Air Service. Chennault developed tactics specifically designed to exploit Zero weaknesses while avoiding Zero strengths. Never engage in a turning dogfight. Never try to outclimb a Zero. Instead, use altitude advantage. Dive from above. Make a high-speed firing pass. Extend away using superior dive speed. Climb. Back to altitude. Repeat. The tactics worked. Between December 19th, 1941 and July 4th, 1942, the Flying Tigers claimed 297 Japanese aircraft destroyed. They lost 14 pilots killed in action. The kill ratio was remarkable, approximately 20-1. Some historians dispute these numbers. Japanese records show fewer losses than the Flying Tigers claimed, but even conservative estimates show a kill ratio of at least 5-1. The P-40 could defeat the Zero when flown correctly. The same tactics were used throughout the Pacific. In New Guinea, P-40 pilots of the 49th Fighter Group used diving attacks against Japanese fighters. In the Aleutian Islands, P-40 pilots intercepted Japanese bombers over Dutch Harbor. In North Africa, P-40 pilots of the Royal Air Force, Desert Air Force fought against Italian and German fighters. The aircraft performed well when pilots understood its limitations. But at Pearl Harbor, on December 7, 1941, American pilots did not have the luxury of choosing their tactics. Welch and Taylor took off into a sky full of Japanese aircraft. They could not climb to altitude and wait for an advantage. They could not refuse combat and extend away. They had to fight immediately with whatever they had. They had partially loaded guns. They had damaged aircraft. They had no tactical advantage whatsoever. And they won anyway. Not because the P-40 was superior to the Zero, not because they had better training. They won because they were aggressive, because they pressed the attack, because they refused to be intimidated by superior numbers. The psychological impact was significant. Japanese pilots over Pearl Harbor expected no resistance. American fighters were supposed to be destroyed on the ground. American pilots were supposed to be demoralized and unwilling to fight. Instead, 2 P-40s dove into formation after formation of Japanese aircraft, shot down bombers, shot down fighters, forced the Japanese to maneuver defensively. The Japanese lost 29 aircraft at Pearl Harbor. Not all were shot down by fighters. Anti-aircraft fire accounted for most losses, but the American fighters that got airborne proved that resistance was possible, that Americans would fight back, that the Japanese did not have complete air superiority. The legend of the grounded P-40 shooting down Zeros emerged from this psychological need. Americans needed heroes. They needed proof that Japanese aircraft could be defeated. They needed evidence that American pilots could win. The story of Welch and Taylor provided that evidence. But the story was embellished, made more dramatic, made more heroic. In some versions, the pilots shot down more aircraft than officially credited. In some versions, they fought off entire squadrons single-handedly. In some versions, they achieved impossible feats of marksmanship and flying. and in some versions, pilots supposedly shot down Japanese aircraft from parked fighters on the ground. That version is physically impossible. The P-40's guns could not elevate sufficiently to engage aircraft overhead while the plane sat on the ground. The gun mounts were fixed. They pointed forward along the aircraft's longitudinal axis. To aim at a target, the entire aircraft had to point at the target. A grounded P-40 with its nose on the ground could not aim at aircraft overhead. The pilot could not traverse the guns independently. There was no mechanism to do so. The only way to shoot down an aircraft was to take off and maneuver into firing position. But the legend persists because it represents a deeper truth. American pilots at Pearl Harbor fought back with everything available. They improvised. They ignored orders when necessary. They took risks that should have gotten them killed. And some of them survived to fight another day. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Welch and Taylor both continued flying combat missions after Pearl Harbor. Welch remained in the Pacific Theater. He flew P-38s and P-39s. He was credited with 16 total victories by the end of the war. He survived malaria. He survived multiple aircraft malfunctions. He survived 3.5 years of continuous combat. After the war, he became a test pilot for North American aviation. Some sources claim he broke the sound barrier in an F-86 Sabre before Chuck Yeager's official flight in the X-1. The claim has never been definitively proven or disproven. Welch died on October 12, 1954, while testing an F-100 Super Sabre. The aircraft broke apart during a high-speed dive. Welch attempted to eject, but was killed in the breakup. Taylor also continued flying after Pearl Harbor. He transferred to the South Pacific. He flew P-40 Warhawks out of Guadalcanal. He was credited with shooting down one more Japanese aircraft. His combat career was cut short when someone fell on him during an air raid. The accident broke his leg. He returned to the United States for medical treatment. After the war, he joined the Alaska Air National Guard. He worked in the insurance industry. He lived to age 86 and died on November 25, 2006. Both men received the Distinguished Service Cross. Both were nominated for higher awards. Both were denied because they had taken off without authorization on December 7th. The bureaucratic decision reflected the military culture of 1941. Following orders was paramount. Initiative was not always rewarded, but by 1942, the culture had changed. The Navy created the Navy Cross specifically to reward initiative and aggressive action. The Army Air Forces began promoting officers who showed tactical innovation. Welch and Taylor's actions at Pearl Harbor became the template. The P-40 Warhawks served throughout World War II. Over 18,000 were produced. They fought in every theater: North Africa, Mediterranean, China, Burma, India, Pacific, Eastern Europe. Soviet pilots flew P-40s under Lend-Lease. British pilots flew them in the Desert Air Force. Australian pilots flew them in New Guinea. New Zealand pilots flew them in the Solomons. The aircraft was never the best fighter in any category, but it was available. It was reliable. It was durable. And in the hands of skilled pilots, using proper tactics, it could defeat any enemy fighter. The legend of the grounded P-40 reflects America's need for heroes in December 1941. The reality is more complex and more interesting. Real pilots made real decisions under impossible pressure. They used real tactics based on understanding their aircraft's strengths and limitations. They fought real battles against skilled opponents flying superior aircraft. And sometimes they won, not because of miracles, not because of impossible heroics, but because they understood how to fight, because they were aggressive when aggression was necessary, because they refused to give up when surrender would have been easier. That is the real story of Pearl Harbor and the P-40 Warhawk. Not a legend of impossible victories from grounded aircraft, but the true story of pilots who took off under fire, who flew damaged aircraft, with partial ammunition loads, who engaged superior enemy formations and fought their way through, who proved that American pilots could fight back and win. The truth is more remarkable than the legend. And the truth is what we remember. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.